The White House says its entire energy team has a game plan to keep oil prices stable, pointing to efforts to provide insurance coverage and military escorts if needed to support shipping in the Middle East. The problem there is no one knows how that's going to work. We haven't seen any plans, and the market is basically saying, show us the details and we'll give you a market reaction. How long this conflict will go on with the midterm elections approaching. Jack Lew is the professor at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. More than that, he's the US ambassador to Israel, of course, Chief of Staff to President Obama, Director of OMB, and, of course, Treasury Secretary. Mr. Secretary Jack Lew joins me now. A simple question. When we have, Jack Lew, when we have, first of all, very good to see you, when we have oil at $80 plus a barrel and a sort of open-ended war underway, how much do you think the US economy can withstand of that sort of pressure?
It's good to be with you, Richard. I think the question that everyone wishes they knew the answer to was how long this goes on and how bad it gets. It's not the slightest bit surprising that 5 days into a fairly major regional conflict, that there's a lot of nervousness and markets are going up and down, not at the same time. I don't think that is something that indicates long-term threats to the U.S. economy. I don't know if the impact on energy prices is going to be something that's measured in weeks or months or longer. So there's so much that's unknown. You know, we all know that energy prices, if they go up and stay up, have an impact on inflation and growth. And if oil prices keep going up, if they hit $100 a barrel, you know, you're going to see some loss of growth and an increase in inflation. That will be very unpopular, but the U.S. economy is in decent shape going into this, so it won't turn it around necessarily. It's a politically very big challenge because you mentioned in your introduction, gasoline prices going up to $3.25. You know, that's a roughly 10% increase in a week. It's not going to necessarily change people's standard of living right away, but it's going to be very unpopular.
Right. Are you surprised at the equity markets, except for today? We were over 1,000 points low. We came off the lows. But are you surprised that they haven't had more of a reaction in the initial stages of this war? Bearing in mind, obviously, the wider economics of this, they, I suppose, holding their own for the moment, it might be a way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've gone up and down. We'll see what they do tomorrow. I mean, if you look over these last 5 days, it's been losses with some recoveries and then losses again. So I think that's an expression of nervousness. There are separate things going on in the economy. There was some jitters about AI and technology last week. That is probably working its way through the system right now as everyone's focused on Iran. Look, I think fundamentally, the question is, what is the plan? The war clearly has gone very quickly to a pretty high level. The amount of damage, you look at the issue of the Strait of Hormuz and whether or not it will or won't remain open. We don't know what capacities Iran still has to do physical damage that would cause a long-term blockage. We don't know, whether the plans to keep the straits open work. I know my initial questions about that are we really going to offer U.S. insurance protection to oil tankers that are taking oil to China? And are we going to send U.S. naval protection for those? So it's very complicated. It's not like the oil going through the strait all comes here.
Last night on this program, we were talking about the War Powers Act and all of that. To a certain extent, that's somewhat of a red herring because the thing is now underway. But it raises the question of whether the failure to put together a wider alliance, that famous phrase that you'll be well familiar with, coalition of the willing, is really damaging. At the moment, it's basically US and Israel, with everybody else being dragged along like the UK for some bases when necessary. Should there have been more prep before this?
Starting with the domestic part of that, it's a hugely important question, Richard. Our Constitution gives war-making powers to the Congress. It's Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution. Having members of Congress not even understanding what the goals of the war are, when it's a war that was chosen in time and intensity, it wasn't imposed on us by external events, it's not good. So the fact that that vote is passed doesn't change the fact that Congress has not been included in this process, and more importantly, that the American people don't understand what the goals and the end state that's being desired is, and the consequences that could come from it. So I think that's a hugely important issue that is not particularly unique here. It's just more pronounced because of the nature of the decision and the kinetic action. On the international front, I think going into this without more prearranged support from allies is problematic. I think Iran has made it actually less problematic by attacking so many of the Gulf states and European and EU interests in the region, that it's kind of forced others to come in. I don't think it's a good thing for the United States to be seen as going it alone.
To some extent, Benjamin Netanyahu is getting a lot of what he's always wanted in this sense. And I wonder, as a former ambassador to Israel, do you see that? Well, when I say the US has been led into this, obviously it hasn't directly, but Netanyahu is getting more out of this in a sense than Donald Trump does with the US economy.
So, Richard, I don't know how to answer that because I haven't heard a clear explanation from our administration as to exactly what the reason for the timing of this was and the urgency. And some things have been said and reversed rather quickly. No one is going to disagree that the leadership in Iran had done evil things. I remember well when they killed Americans at the Beirut airport, and when they killed U.S. sailors on the USS Cole. I met with the families of those sailors in the White House. So I deeply understand the evil that was projected by that regime. At the same time, when the United States goes to war, it usually takes into consideration the full regional consequence, the global consequence, the impact on the United States, and most importantly, what it's trying to accomplish. And not having a clear statement of that makes it very hard to know where this is going. And now with various theories being developed about regime change, things that I know in the days when I was getting briefings were considered unlikely now seem to be discussed as if they're realistic options.
Finally, I just want to touch on this, the tone. Now, whether it was the Defense Secretary yesterday talking quiet death of missiles of this, or whether it's the White House putting out that video with call to duty in the video, like a video game, the chest beating, the brigado that is coming out, this is very different. This is almost warrior spirit, which I guess the administration would say exactly is what is necessary. How do you feel about that?
Look, war is literally a deadly business. It takes a huge toll in terms of human life and national treasure. It's something that the decisions ought to be made with gravity and not treated as something that is other than what it is. It's not a reason that you don't go to war. It's a reason why you should be very clear-headed about why you're going to war, what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not even saying that case couldn't be made here. I just haven't heard it made clearly, which means it's very hard to convince the American people in the world what you're trying to accomplish. I hope that they do a better job explaining what the goals are, and I hope that the success of the operation leads to a more stable Iran. But that's not been mapped out so that it's visible right now.
It's the last question, actually. There's one last one, always the last one. What's your biggest fear here? Because you've been in the Situation Room, you've been in the Oval Office, you've seen how things get out of control, exogenous events, unexpected events. So as you survey the area, what's your biggest fear?
You know, Richard, as I participated in discussions over the years about the possibility of a war with Iran, the question was never, should we stop them from having a nuclear weapon? Everyone agreed we would. And I worked for two presidents who developed the munitions to be able to accomplish that. The question wasn't, are they doing evil things and would it be better for the world if we could stop them? The question was, can we get in and out without doing more damage than we're willing to bear? And that is a question that we used to weigh heavily. A regional war, long-term impact. My biggest concern is that those things haven't been fully thought through. I hope they have.
Mr. Secretary, I'm grateful, sir. We will talk again as this progresses, and thank you for taking the time to have a good discussion with us this evening. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Richard.
Now,